So today I'm planning to show you how to make the classic Zazu everyday pot holder. And I'm going to make two. One I'm going to make like I always do, where I show you everything so that if you want to do it yourself you can. And then the other one will run down in the corner, and I'm just going to make that from end to end and run it at real speed, and so you'll see how long that takes me to make one of those. So I have two set up here, and it's basically a 9x9 square fabric on the front, and then a piece of batting the same size, and then Insulbright, and then batting, and then a backing fabric for the back of the quilt sandwich. And so I have that times two. And so I'm just going to quilt this. I usually like to start in the middle and kind of work my way out, and I try to attach the edge as I go. I used to go all the way around it, and you certainly could baste or do that with your walking foot, but I find that if I just manage the bulk as I go, I can keep it pucker free and end up with a nice pot holder. And I don't wear gloves and push my sandwich, I actually grip my quilt sandwich. So I'm going to quilt this. I usually have done it where I quilt the chili pepper fabric a certain way, I quilt the chickens a certain way, and I quilt these wagon wheels the same way. There's that. You can see I have a little distortion between the layers. Okay, so then I just cut it out, and I try to keep a lot of this outside stitching, but I also want to be cutting through all the layers. If I have somewhere where there's been some significant slippage, I still want to have all four layers. I don't want the edges of my pot holders to be thinner than the rest, so that someone might accidentally burn themselves. And so I just cut kind of a wavy shape that preserves some of this edge stitching, and I can look and make sure that I'm showing all three layers of the batting, etc. And I just cut this off. And I've gotten so that my stitching along there is somewhat of a guide for me, because it's just pretty intuitive when you've done something so many times. But you want to get this cut out. One end of the fabric, it's 45 wide. This has not been pre-washed, and I don't feel that it needs to be. And so I fold it, it's in fourths, just the end of it, and then I fold it in eighths. And I'm just going to cut this across. This does waste, and I'm going to do two because I'm going to make that other pot holder after this. To apply this, I am going to see which way the fabric is, if it's directional, and this does have cattails that go like this. And I want it to hang from this corner, and so I'm going to flip it over, and that's where I'm going to start applying my binding. And this has got some stretch to it, so even though this is at the end, I usually don't prop my foot. I can usually just get on there. And I'm just going to sew this around, and I'm going to fold it in the corner the way that you need to in order to miter a corner, and I'll show that when I get there. My stitch is about 2. And I'm going to pull this out to show you. And so you're folding this at a 45-degree angle, like that. And then you're going to fold it back and match up to your edge here, and then you're going to stitch from this edge over. So it's straight like this, and you want to fold it at an angle like that. And if you've done bindings before, you've probably done this, and then you fold it over like that and more or less match it up. Because this isn't straight, you have a little bit of play. And when I stopped stitching, I wanted to stop just a little short of this fold, or at that fold that I knew I was going to do. You don't want to go to the edge because then you can't fold it. You need to still be able to fold it like that. And then like that. And then start stitching at the edge. So I'm going to be folding this and sticking it in to do each corner to go around this. And here, this is the edge of the pot holder, and what I'm doing is coming pretty close to that edge and then back stitching at least once. Okay, so all I do to iron this is make sure I'm really flattening this. I use steam and I try to poke into each corner and get each side, and I usually do a whole stack of them, and that's what it looks like when it's done. I like to put the loop on this using this tail that's hanging off, and this is why I always have tons of this stuff around. It's because this is about how much I cut off, and I actually have a friend I give these to, and she makes beautiful little quilts out of them. Okay, so I just want my tail to be about this long, about 5.5, maybe 6 inches. The way that I do this, I usually start next to the opening here, and I like to cut these concave areas, and so I start there because I want it pulled in tight there, and I work from this side, from the theme fabric, not the back, and then I pull this over and I put one right in this corner. And as I'm doing it, I'm really trying to tighten this up. I don't want this to be baggy and loose and have a lot of extra. So I pin these a lot, and the pinning's time consuming, but it's all part of it. And here I don't pin all the way to this edge. I start in the middle and I pin there, and then I do one more that's halfway to the edge, and then I don't pin the last one, and you'll see why in a minute. I pull this down and I use this finger in here to really flatten that down. I'm really trying to get this pulled over to there, and then I flatten this down. And this corner's a little mashed right now, and so I kind of, because it's not completely square, I kind of work on that and try to get that corner so that it's going to be pretty neatly mitered, and try to suck this up. And I'm more concerned that this look like a neat corner than that this be exactly at any kind of 45-degree angle in that 90 degrees, because it's not a square piece anyway. It's never going to be perfect, and a very little bit of that's going to remain on the piece. Then I pin in the center here, and then I pin this here, and then I don't pin yet because I need the room to manipulate this corner. I've got to do 3 like this. So it's a total of 16 pins. Okay, so in order to be able to do this, to stitch around without accidentally stitching this down, I'm going to fold this all the way back out of my way. And if you look on the back, it's even kind of pulled a little extra far to the point where it's showing this little corner here. And then this is what I'm going to put in, so that I'm going to really be, I'm going to be stitching down along here. This is the line where I'm going to stitch. So I pull that back and I put it in the machine like that, with that flattened out of the way. I get right to the corner. Okay, so with my needle kicked over one, doing about a 2.5, I'm just going to sew around. I'm going to pivot in the corners and I'm going to pull my pins before I get there. And I'm going to kind of push down, especially after I pull the pins, so that this doesn't slip and get baggy on me. And it's really on these concave areas where it's going to tend to loosen up on you after you pull the pin. What I'm going to do is just sew past here. I'm going to take my fabric out to the end and I'm going to roll it so that it's basically the same folds as it is around there. So it's really just, it's one fold and then another fold, and then I'm going to have that continue from coming off this edge, and I'm going to sew right in the next to the ditch as I have it, and when I get here I'm going to hop up onto here, and then I'm just going to do kind of a wiggly line down the end. It's just what I've always done. You can go straight down the end, I've done that often too, but you want to be on the fabric so you're sort of hemming that down as you go. And then there's a step you have to do to make this pot holder, and what you do is you cut at that same miter angle-ish over to here, and then we're going to cut a notch out, like that. And it's more or less even with this line of stitching where that point is, with this line of stitching there. We just cut out a notch. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can do this with your feed dogs up or down depending on whether you really want to drive through all this, or because you're really going in one direction, you can allow your feed dogs to move you along. I would still have your stitch set pretty tight so that it's just a little help. Maybe set it about 1. So I'm going to do some tiny little stitches or a little back and forth action to tie at this corner. When I get to the corner, what I'm going to do is finish out, come over to here, and drive between these two pieces of fabric up onto here, onto my tail, and then I'm going to go out my tail again, sort of in wavy lines that don't follow the ones I did before. I just make this end pretty wavy. I'm just going to cut this, and I just usually start at any corner and I do a little clip. And this is where these curved scissors are important. Because this curves up, I'm not stabbing into this and accidentally poking a hole. It's very easy to do when your quilting is puffy like this. And so, and then this end, this end, I just like to do kind of a wiggly line, and then I angle off the edge. I don't try to fold it in half like that. I actually bring it around so it looks like a loop, and I put it there at the length that I like it. And sometimes I trim a little of this off after I sew, and sometimes I don't. And I just do that, and I go back and forth like 5, 6, 7 times. And then I cut off all my threads. Of course, I'll wash this, and it will get ratty around the end, and I will press it really flat with my steam iron, mostly from the back, and then I will trim it because it will get ratty, and I don't want the person that takes this home to deal with all that rattiness after the first washing, because it's by far the most ratty after the first washing. When I first started making pot holders, I made them perfect. I made them perfectly square, and I made them with perfect binding, and it wasn't very artistic. It was fairly boring. It was only about the fabric, and I wanted to do more. And when I was invited to sell items at the local art museum's Christmas show, I redesigned the potholder to be more artistic, and that's where the wavy edges and the raw binding, raw edge binding came in. And at that time we had added a second floor to our house, and so I hadn't actually sewn and sold anything for 4 years. That's why I'm always fuzzy on talking about how long I've been in business, because there was a long gap between when I first started and learned how to quilt and was selling very conventional. They actually weren't that conventional, but they were a lot closer to being conventional than what I've been doing for the last decade.